Good morning, everybody. Dr. Morrison, Dr. Agarwal. First of all, thank you for that very generous introduction, which I was listening to behind the stage. But I want to tell you all that I'm really very pleased to join you this morning to share my view on the conference theme of South Asia looking east. In many ways, this has been the great change in my 4 decades as an Indian diplomat. And having served in Japan, Singapore, and China, I have some advantages of developing insights from the field as well. In my view, the strategic implications of the eastward interface of the Indian subcontinent are still unfolding. Earlier in slower motion, its quickening pace now certainly elicits greater attention, and I'm very pleased that you have chosen to focus on this subject this morning. Now, looking east, as you're all aware, is a vector which has evolved into a metaphor. It has a particular connotation with reference to India, one that developed over a quarter of a century. Initially, it started out as an expression of India's opening out to the world after decades of relatively autarkic growth. Because our early partnership in the 1990s were with members of the ASEAN, it then acquired a specific meaning as developing ties with them and learning from their experiences. The CECA, the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement with Singapore, was in many ways a watershed. And this then encouraged other bilateral and regional agreements. In due course, efforts were made to establish more connectivity with the region, physical, virtual, as well as soft. And progress was made in engagement with ASEAN, reflected in India's participation in ASEAN-centric forums like the ARF, the East Asia Summit, the ADMM+, etc. So what you have is really an agenda of trade, investment, and economic changes that grew into a larger strategic engagement. Now, it also went beyond ASEAN to cover Japan, Republic of Korea, and China. With the first two, India concluded the CEPA, which is the variant of CECA, while with China, trade expanded dramatically, even though its lack of balance actually emerged as an increasing concern. In recent years, this outreach has extended to Australia and to the Pacific Islands as well. We had a Pacific Island summit, a second summit last year. And as a result, India's foreign policy actually acquired a footprint as well as a dimension that it did not have earlier. The profundity of this change is underlined by the larger mind space that the world to India's east now occupies when it comes to economics, technology, security, strategy, and even culture. While this assessment reflects an embedded perception in India, what is perhaps less adequately appreciated is the extent to which the pull or the push towards the east is making us go back to our roots. One important long-term manifestation of this is the revival of India's eastern seaboard. Suppressed during the colonial period since it faced the wrong direction, its natural advantages are today being rediscovered. In the last decade, that started out as essentially an entrepreneurial activity, responding to the growing trade with the East. But today, it is actually a structured, high-priority, government-supported agenda that has very significant implications for the hinterland economy. We have a program called Sagar Mala that covers port modernization, port connectivity, port-led industrial development, and coastal community development. Its goal is to increase coastal shipping fivefold, transform inland waterways, and create maritime logistics that would be required by a more industrialized India. Development on the East Coast holds a real potential for the structural reorientation of the Indian economy and society. Its significance certainly needs greater debate and deliberation. There is also a broad recognition that physical connectivity to the East offers game-changing possibilities, not only for our relationship with the ASEAN, a foreign policy issue, but also for the economic future of our own states in the Northeast and the East. Consequently, higher priority is being accorded to key infrastructure projects with Myanmar that could accomplish this objective, including the Kaladan multimodal transport project that links a part of India to Sitwe port, and the completion of the trilateral highway that could extend to Thailand. Recent visits by the Prime Minister to Indochina have also underlined the interest of the CMLV nations in further road connectivity all the way to Vietnam. The conclusion of the land boundary agreement between India and Bangladesh has also created a positive environment in which the two countries can take forward an ambitious agenda of rail and road connectivity, inland waterways, coastal shipping, and energy cooperation. This marked upswing in ties holds a potential for India's interface vis-à-vis the East to broaden out considerably. In fact, it creates a climate in the Bay of Bengal for more regional initiatives that could be taken forward by a grouping like BIMSTEC. That India is moving in parallel on development projects with Indian Ocean island and littoral neighbors will also be helpful to this endeavor. Since India's current connectivity to the East is largely maritime, it is only appropriate that we consider the relevance of our activities to the south in the oceans to the task of acting east. Maritime traditions in this country may have developed continuously and organically, but there's no doubt that a stronger engagement with ASEAN has given it a new impetus in recent years. In fact, it is our expanding horizons that provide the driving force which has allowed India to emerge as a net security provider and a first responder to humanitarian and disaster relief situations in the Indian Ocean. This trend is likely to not only continue, but actually grow in the foreseeable future for two reasons. One, India's own economic capacities are expanding and could well make a quantum jump as its Make in India initiative takes off. Both demand and supply centered on India can be safely predicted to increase as a consequence. Two, the larger rebalancing of the global economy in the direction of Asia is also set to enhance the importance of the Indian Ocean as an economic highway. Being located at the center of gravity, India's responsibilities towards safe and unimpeded flow of commerce grow commensurately in an era of greater burden sharing. It is likely that this role would itself become an additional binding force between India and its eastern partners who are directly benefited by safer oceans. ASEAN remains very much at the core of India's vision, looking eastwards. In the last decade, commerce has grown tenfold to the $70 billion level, and it accounts roughly for about 10% of our trade. It has also been a very active investment relationship both ways. Bilateral relationships with all the constituent states of the ASEAN have developed in a very robust manner, and we have been engaging ASEAN collectively through digital and physical connectivity projects, space technology initiatives, capacity building, including in IT, and a broad range of tele-based and quick impact projects, especially in the CMLV group. Political and security cooperation with ASEAN members has also expanded steadily. This is a region where we have considerable cultural comfort. Overall, India values highly the contribution made by ASEAN to the evolution of regional cooperation initiatives in Asia. We believe that the cohesion of ASEAN strengthens regional stability and look forward to our continuing engagement with that grouping. The direction of our ties with Vietnam, a recent example of that interaction, is illustrative of the progress that South Asia, especially India, has made in looking east. The upgrading of ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership, a term that Vietnam reserves only for Russia and China so far, speaks for itself. New agreements to cooperate in space, cybersecurity, white shipping, IT and software development, education, health, and standards underline the broadening of these ties. And the security convergence was brought out not just by policy articulation, but concrete cooperation such as the supply of offshore patrol vessels and the new $500 million line of credit for defense. Now, the relevance of looking or acting east has interestingly been renewed by domestic developments in India over the last 2 years. A quarter of a century ago, India turned eastwards at a time of crisis. Today, we look again, but with considerable deliberation and after due diligence. The driving factor in doing so is a well-considered national strategy of transforming India into an industrial power. This is expressed through the Make in India initiative, but supplemented through a raft of other campaigns. Skill India represents its HR facet, Digital India, its communication one, 100 smart cities, its urban future, Swachh Bharat or Clean India, its broader environment, Startup India, its entrepreneurial side, and what we call Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, which is educating your daughters. It's an enabler that will lead to more female employment. An integrated take of these efforts would confirm that their overall thrust is similar to the developmental direction of many polities in the East. The economic and developmental ambitions that India is now pursuing require sustained partnerships of those who have traversed a similar path in the recent past. We need not just technology and capital, but knowledge and best practices from them. In many ways, this country's future will lie in successful leapfrogging. The East has much to teach us in that regard. Paradoxically, a manufacturing correction is happening in India at the very time when those Eastern economies are undertaking a services correction. Hopefully, we will all arrive at a common ground that may bring us even closer. Japan and South Korea, along with ASEAN, stand out as natural partners in this context. It is therefore hardly surprising that they have been the focus of intensive Indian diplomacy. Both nations have already established strong credentials in India by the virtue of earlier successful industrial ventures. But the expectation now is of a much higher order. We are looking at infrastructure development, scaling up industrial capacities, technology upgrading, and investment flows of a transformational nature. The realization of agendas agreed upon with both nations actually hold that possibility. With Japan, they include high-speed railway, additional industrial corridors, new industrial townships, ambitious FDI and ODA targets, an investment-led ODA approach, and vigorous collaboration in critical sectors like energy and skills. With South Korea, the focus is on their particular areas of strength such as shipbuilding, maritime transport, industrial parks, steel, and smart grids. In parallel to enhancing economic cooperation, an important aspect of these developing ties is a recognition of their strategic character. Consequently, exchanges and conversations now cover a much broader spectrum of issues, including our converging security interests. In fact, these two nations and Australia are the only three with which India holds 2+2 foreign and defense affairs talks. With Japan, the security cooperation has made more rapid progress and is reflected in annual exercises, an agreed defense framework, and discussions on equipment and technology transfers. India's approach to these relationships, and indeed to the entire region, east of us, takes into account the need for a balanced and participative Asian security architecture. The world is definitely better off with a multipolar and multilateral Asia, as is the continent itself. In any discussion of India's Act East policy, Sino-Indian ties are a subject of heightened attention. Part of the reason is the weight of history that this particular relationship carries on its shoulders. Some of it also arises from the great potential that it holds and the impact that its direction could have on regional and global politics. The report card of our ties for the last 3 decades is much stronger than many assume. From a situation of limited contacts and content, India-China relations have today transitioned out of the state of abnormalcy. We must give due credit to the effort of successive governments on both sides who have ensured peace and tranquility on the border, even as negotiations on its settlement continues. Difficult problems, some of them pertaining to sovereignty, have not been sidestepped. No less significant is the ability of the two nations to work together at global forums on developmental issues. That we meet and cooperate in mechanisms ranging from the EAS, G20, and SCO to BRICS, RIC, and BASIC is not a small achievement. On the economic side, the rapid rise of trade with China has had a profound, if mixed, implication. While it has allowed some new capacities to be built in areas like telecom and power generation, it has also impacted negatively on others. Fair market access in China itself remains an issue for Indian companies, including in globally competitive areas like pharmaceuticals and IT. The current government has taken initiatives to address these challenges and strengthening the positive direction of these ties. They include a more enthusiastic welcome of Chinese investments, establishment of industrial parks by Chinese companies, collaboration in railways, and a more liberal visa regime. A full realization of the vision agreed upon by the leaders of the two countries in 2014-15 requires relations to be continuously nurtured. Displaying mutual sensitivity to each other's concerns is very necessary in that context. There is an expectation in India that a partner like China would be appreciative of India's interests, especially when they are not in conflict with those of China. Combating terrorism is one such area, and sanctioning of well-known terrorist leaders and organizations should not emerge as an issue of difference. Nor should reservations on developmental issues, such as India's predictable access to international cooperation and investments in the field of civilian nuclear energy. It is imperative for the future of Asia, and indeed the world, that the two nations approach each other with strategic maturity. When South Asia looks east, attention focuses on Myanmar and increasingly on Bangladesh. India's bilateral ties with both countries are strong, substantive, and rapidly expanding. But we do need to reflect on the support that the international community should extend to these two countries. Myanmar has taken some big steps in its democratic journey, and the strengthening of its developmental work, national integrity, and governance processes has a larger regional impact. In Bangladesh, secularism and even pluralism are under stress and must be supported without hesitation. It is particularly important that we keep our eye on the overall direction of developments rather than get excessively fixated with individual events. This approach assumes more significance when it speaks for the entire region, not just for India. That puts a premium on the success of SAARC and progress in regional development. India, in recent years, has emerged as a champion of regionalism and is vigorously promoting more cooperation, connectivity, and contacts. It has displayed a growing ability to be patient, flexible, and creative in this regard. We are confident that most of our neighbors will appreciate that India is not only offering to share its prosperity, but that this partnership improves their access and their prospects. After all, a more cohesive and integrated South Asia will command greater value internationally. Connectivity is a major consideration when different parts of an underconnected continent look at each other. Few would differ on the merits of promoting what clearly has strong growth implications. But if indeed these activities are meant for larger good, then it is also imperative that they be deliberated upon broadly and with transparency and objectivity. To the extent they are perceived as developmental rather than strategic, connectivity initiatives would gain greater traction and wider support. India is today at an important geopolitical crossroads. Its ability to integrate more closely to the East has the potential to transform the Asian landscape. Fuller transformation, however, awaits a similar integration to the West. For the moment, we perhaps will have to settle for a bypass to Iran and the Gulf until a desire for regional cooperation asserts itself more strongly. In many ways, India realizing its integrated potential has a significance beyond its national prospects, which are weighty enough by itself. And certainly a more seamless interface between South Asia and East and Southeast Asia is a big step in that direction. That is why it ranks so high in our strategic priorities. Thank you for your attention.
I want to thank the Foreign Secretary. I think he gave a remarkably comprehensive speech. It dealt with general drivers of change in Indian foreign policy, and it dealt with specific relationships. What we have is about 10 minutes for a kind of Q&A. And what we would like is, I'll take 2 or 3 to begin with. He can choose the ones he likes or reinterpret them as he would like to. And please I want questions and not comments. We'll start with you, sir.
I'm Ashish from Mumbai, the Quint. Sir, Kavi from Thailand said in the earlier session that India is quite popular in Southeast Asian nations, but India, and they are waiting for India to come, but India doesn't come. It is very slow, they complained. So why is India slow? And second, what are we doing about it?
Thank you. That's a perfect kind of question. Yes, over here. Yes, over here.
Foreign Secretary, Times Now. Yesterday, this is about looking east. Yesterday and several days ago, the Prime Minister himself was in the east, in China and in Laos. And he has made 2 major statements about terrorism. Now, what kind of reaction have you got on that from President Obama and other senior leaders who he interacted with in China and in Laos?
My name is Sanjay. I work with German Television South Asia Bureau. My question is like your approach towards Southeast Asia. How is like you and China, India and China, they don't see each other. They are rivals in South Asia. How you're going to, this is unfolding situation. How you're going to sort out this issue? Because China looks differently at Southeast Asia, you look differently. How it's going to play out in future?
Okay, thank you. I hope for the next round we'll have some women who ask questions as well. Mr. Foreign Secretary.
Well, the first question, are we slow in moving towards Southeast Asia? Honest answer is probably a yes. What are you doing about it? Trying to do it faster. And I don't mean it facetiously, because there are areas where we've actually done well. There are mostly these tend to be, say for example, some of our projects which deal with IT or teaching English language or trade, and if you look at the trade relationship has grown 10 times. The investment relationship has probably grown many more times than that. Where is it actually we have fallen short? I think most of all in the physical connectivity projects, and particularly the two that I singled out, Kaladan and Trilateral Highway. And I think there are, again, I'm being very self-critical here, 3 reasons for it. Part is our own internal efficiencies on projects is not gold standard. Okay, I mean, logically, there's no reason why it should be better on a border project than it would be at home. Number 2, when we work abroad, we still tend to approach projects from a very domestic perspective. The domestic rules apply, the processes apply, so it's much harder. And 3, the particular border, the India-China border, India-Myanmar border, that's not the easiest place in the world to work in. I mean, just getting physical access, visas, getting your equipment in, getting your reports done. I mean, if you look at it, not too many countries have too strong a track record on doing these projects in that geography. But having said that, I would say, I mean, right now for me, in terms of India's projects which we are doing abroad, and we're really doing an enormous number of projects. And what certainly this government is trying to do is, rather than take on new commitments, we are trying to close out projects which have been pending for a long time. I mean, we just finished the Afghan parliament, the dam in Salma, the stadium in Jaffna. So we're trying to close out these big commitments, and these 2 would rank very, very high. But we are trying to also evolve a model or a way of doing work abroad better than we have done in the past. Now, I would underline there that when we were in Vietnam and in Laos yesterday, there's a lot of interest in actually the Trilateral Highway taking us all the way into Vietnam. And if some of it is in our hands, if we can do the breakthrough on our borders and take it up to Thailand. And then there is already a grid out there with which you got to connect up. And if you can actually build road connectivity from Vietnam to India, I think that would honestly be an enormous game changer. On the terrorism issue, my sense is that today there is a broad understanding in the world about, in fact, a growing awareness of the threat posed by terrorism. Also, a better sense of where is it being bred and nurtured, and where, in a sense, what is the nesting ground for this in our region. In terms of how people reacted, I think different governments have commented on it, including the particular president in whom you seem to have an interest. And their statements are there for you to read. Overall, though, I think there is today a much sharper awareness of the fact that terrorism is no longer a national issue. That, the idea that, oh, this is India's problem, so we are okay. I think that era is today behind us. I think people know that terrorist organizations and individuals are very well connected. And what is India's problem today can be somebody else's problem. Not can be, in fact, has been somebody else's problem. The third question, India and China, I don't actually accept the characterization which you had advanced. I think India and China have a complicated relationship. My sense is we should not ignore the collaborative or the convergent side of that relationship as well. There would be, there are areas like, in fact, my own remarks have addressed it, areas like climate change, or a lot of trade issues at international forums, where actually our interests are not dissimilar, and we have some history of working together. So it would be, in my view, a gross mistake to approach this relationship as a zero-sum game, because approaching it would tend to validate that approach. We should, I think, more than any other relationship, look very strongly for common areas, and where we do find them, develop those common areas. Having said that, I think where we seem to differ, it's also equally important to look at what is causing that and how we can bridge it.
Okay, let's see if we have time for one more. Let me privilege a woman, so here.
Thank you for your remarks. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what you said about the One Belt, One Road initiative. I think you made a comment saying it needs to be negotiated, not unilateral. Can you say more about how India feels about that?
Right behind you.
My name is Jagannath Chattopadhyay. I work for Anand Bazar Patrika. You mentioned about the Bangladesh. Could you please elaborate the recent engagement of the India, particularly after this terrorist attack? Because something happens in Bangladesh. Particularly after the Holy Artisan Bakery attack, because it has huge impact on India, particularly the West Bengal. Anything happened there?
Okay, one more question here. Great.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Foreign Secretary, this is regarding terrorism again. You have spoken about how China has been supporting or backing countries at the United Nations. We're looking at the 1267 Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee. The deadline ends this month, end on Masood Azhar. Any forward movement that we'd see from China? Also, the United States of America has backed India when it comes to Pakistan and terrorism emanating from Pakistan, but differentiates between state actors and non-state actors, says Pakistan is intent in fighting terror. Do you agree?
First, on the connectivity issue, I didn't single out any particular program by name, but I do take the common sense deduction you have made. The fact is that, first of all, some of these are labels, okay? Some of these are projects. I think it's important for us to look at both of them. One of the projects which actually we have agreed on quite some years ago and is something called the BCIM corridor, which is the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor, which essentially envisages coming down from the province of Yunnan down to Bangladesh. And there is actually an expert group with government nominees, which I think which has completed its report, and we are due to look at it by the end of the year. So it's not that we are dogmatic about it, or our minds are not open, but I mean it's again to me it's a completely rational, reasonable proposition that if you want me to do something, I would prefer that you and I have a talk about it and find a common basis, agreed basis to go forward. It leaves me in a much more difficult position if you show me your plans and say, well, this is what I've got. So that need for a broader consultation, I think is a fairly well recognized need. On Bangladesh, look, yes, we do take that particular terrorist attack very seriously, and we are very sensitive to the possibility of terrorism growing in that country. But that is why, in our view, there should be greater international support for the forces of secularism and pluralism and a government which has a more progressive worldview in dealing with this. In fact, this is the time to be supportive, not to be critical to the point of detracting from their efforts. And I think certainly that is the message that we have given out in Bangladesh, and we ourselves work very closely with the Bangladesh government. And never right to fault a government for what happens, because at the end of the day, show me a government which has been able to prevent terrorist attacks. I mean, everybody, at some point of time, those guys get through. So that to my mind, should become a sort of a rallying point rather than, the opposite. On the 1267, let's see what happens. I think this is a conference to do with the media, and I think I'm always a little chary about predicting events, because it actually robs the media of their own bread and butter, because there's no news to report at the end of it all. So I think you need to be patient and see where we go. Obviously, we have our viewpoint. We've been trying very hard to persuade people with a different viewpoint, and our stand is that what we have proposed is not. It's not that we are the outliers in this situation. I mean, most of the world accepts it. If there are 15 countries and an overwhelming majority of those 15 countries are going one way, there surely must be a logical reason why that is so. So we always wait and hope. On the state actors and non-state actors, see, it's not just state actors and non-state actors. I mean, it is also, at some stage, that differentiation is not borne out on the ground. There is a connect between state actor and non-state actor, which is why we use the word it's sponsored. The state cannot escape responsibility by saying it's non-state. After all, and this is just not vis-a-vis India. I mean, this was the situation even after 9/11. After 9/11, countries were told that you can't protect people and say, well, this is not the government doing it. That's a false dichotomy, the state, non-state. And we've always maintained the view that acting against some groups is not a justification for giving a free pass, leave alone active support for other groups. So you can't have a segmented, differentiated fight against terrorism.
I want to thank the Foreign Secretary for having given so generously of his time and his wisdom. I think we're all very confident that Indian foreign policy is in the very best hands. Thank you.